Before royal headlines and palace doors, Meghan Markle lived a different life, one that started in Chicago with Joe Giuliano, the man she first married. His family, however, rejected her, wiped away their marriage, and kept a secret that shaped her path. After years of silence, Meghan Markle's first husband has finally spoken out, and what he's revealed has left everyone stunned. What truly happened between them? Today we uncover Joe Giuliano's explosive revelation and the truth behind Meghan's first marriage. The secret marriage Meghan never spoke about. Long before the tiaras, the tabloids, and the titles, there was another chapter in Meghan Markle's life, one she never spoke about, and one few even knew existed. It was a story that didn't begin with royalty or red carpets, but with a quiet, unassuming man named Joe Giuliano. He wasn't rich, famous, or powerful. He was simply the man who once held Meghan's heart, long before the world did. Back then, their relationship appeared innocent, even ordinary. Two young lovers caught up in the thrill of possibility. But behind that picture-perfect beginning, something darker brewed. According to people close to Joe's family, Meghan's charm hid a far more ambitious side. Her fascination with image, her fixation on influence, and her quiet determination to climb higher soon began to worry those around her. The Guiliano family, known in Chicago for their traditional values and protective nature, grew uneasy. They began noticing inconsistencies, details that didn't align. Meghan's stories would shift, small facts would change, and timelines refused to match. One acquaintance recalled that Joe's mother became suspicious after Meghan mentioned finishing school in 1994.
I understand why you are, though. I wasn't expecting it, but I understand why you are, because there is a through line, I think, and
even though records suggested otherwise. At first, it seemed like a simple mistake, but as the contradictions piled up, the family started to believe it was more than that. Some close to the family claimed that Meghan might have been older than she publicly admitted, possibly born in the late 1970s rather than 1981. If true, it meant she wasn't the young, naive woman she presented herself to be, but someone already skilled at shaping her image. To the Guilianos, that realization changed everything. Their marriage, a quiet, almost secret ceremony, reportedly held in a Las Vegas chapel, was over before most even knew it had begun. There were no photos, no announcements, no public records. Within months, the papers were filed, sealed, and hidden from view. It was as though the entire relationship had been erased. Afterward, Joe stepped away from the spotlight entirely.
thank you.
Can we start with the proposal and the actual moment of your engagement? When did it happen? How did it happen?
His family refused to speak publicly, choosing silence over speculation. But as Meghan's fame began to rise, first in television and then in the royal world, whispers about her past resurfaced. Those who remembered the young woman who once walked beside Joe Giuliano began to wonder why that chapter was buried so completely. What could make someone erase an entire marriage? Why would every trace vanish, every detail sealed away? Was it a youthful mistake or a calculated decision by a woman already planning her future? Nearly 3 decades later, fragments of that lost story have begun to surface once more. They reveal not a duchess or a star, but a woman still shaping her destiny long before anyone noticed. Before the palace gates and global fame, there was Meghan Markle, standing in a quiet chapel beside a man named Joe Giuliano, making promises the world was never meant to see. What really happened between Meghan and the Giuliano family? Before the world knew her name, let's dive into the untold story hidden behind that perfect smile. The untold story of Meghan and the Giulianos. There was something about her that drew people in, an effortless charm that made you want to believe every word she said. But behind that radiant smile, some claim to see something else, something calculated. The Giuliano family, a proud Italian-American household from Chicago, once welcomed Meghan Markle with open arms. Yet, not long after, those same arms grew cold, folded, and distant. They began to wonder if the woman who had captured their son's heart was really the person she claimed to be, or someone playing a role too perfectly rehearsed. To understand why they turned away from her, you first have to understand them. The Guilianos were not a family that chased fame or fortune. They lived by the kind of traditions that rarely bend with time. Sundays meant dinner at Nona's table. Fridays meant prayers before the meal. Problems were handled privately, not posted or performed. They believed in loyalty, in silence, in the sacredness of family reputation, not for the world's approval, but for personal honor. So when Joe Giuliano introduced Meghan to them around the mid-2000s, they saw a bright young woman with big dreams, someone who seemed full of promise. She spoke passionately about auditions in Los Angeles, about acting and writing, about being seen. At first, they found her ambition refreshing, different but exciting. But that admiration didn't last. Slowly, unease began to settle in.
Yeah, we've got it in kind of it's good to go with it.
It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Every sentence seemed too smooth, every smile too polished. She could look you in the eye, one family friend later whispered, and make you believe anything. What began as polite curiosity soon turned into cautious observation. Meghan's world revolved around opportunity, scripts, photo shoots, networking, visibility. The Guilianos' world revolved around family. To them, marriage was about partnership, not publicity. They valued staying grounded, while she seemed built to soar. And that difference, small at first, began to pull the two worlds apart. It started quietly. Missed Sunday dinners, forgotten birthdays, short visits to Chicago replaced by longer stays in California. Phone calls from Joe's mother went unanswered, often with the gentle excuse that Meghan was busy. Busy chasing auditions, busy building something that didn't quite fit into their way of life. The family began to worry, not because Meghan was ambitious, but because they feared she was chasing a dream that left no room for their son. She didn't want roots, said one insider softly. She wanted wings. Joe's father, known for his traditional values,
in celebrating the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in your country,
reportedly tried to reason with her. Marriage, he told her one evening, isn't built on red carpets. It's built on quiet days, shared work, and faith. But Meghan saw the world differently. She had a vision, one that stretched far beyond Chicago's quiet suburbs. She wanted to be known, to be remembered. And in her mind, maybe Joe didn't fit that picture forever. As time passed, the warmth drained from the Guiliano home. Conversations turned into silences, visits into tension. By the time anyone realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Meghan had become, in their eyes, not a daughter-in-law, but a visitor passing through. Still, there's a certain irony in how it all unfolded. Years later, as Meghan Markle's name echoed around the world, linked not to a modest Chicago family, but to one of the most famous institutions in history, the Guiliano whispers began to resurface. Some said they weren't surprised. Others said they always saw it coming. To them, the story was never about fame.
In your engagement interview,
Orchestrated reality show. Yep.
It was about trust. And maybe that's what makes this chapter so intriguing. Was Meghan simply misunderstood by a family too traditional to see her potential? Or were they among the first to glimpse the side of her the public wouldn't discover until much later? Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. The Guilianos' silence was not born of hatred, but of heartbreak. They had opened their home to someone they hoped would cherish their son and their values. But as her ambitions grew, and the spotlight followed, they realized that Meghan's path and theirs were never meant to walk side by side. Some say the family still refuses to speak of that time. Others believe they made peace with it long ago. But one thing remains certain. Long before royal titles, global headlines, and televised interviews, there was a quiet Chicago house where the first questions about Meghan Markle were whispered not out of jealousy or judgment, but out of disbelief. Because sometimes, the hardest thing to accept isn't that someone changed. It's realizing they were never who you thought they were. But what really happened in Chicago before Meghan became a global name? Let's dive into the hidden stories that quietly shaped her early life. The secret they buried, Meghan and the family that chose. Silence. For years, whispers floated through Chicago's quiet neighborhoods. Stories that never made the papers but refused to die in private conversations. Somewhere between the glamour that would later define Meghan Markle and the calm, protective world of the Guiliano family. There existed a chapter no one was supposed to read. A love that began in warmth but ended in silence. A promise that once sounded eternal but was later sealed behind closed doors. By the mid-1990s, Meghan had already begun crafting her image. Bright, ambitious, unshakably determined. Joe Giuliano, on the other hand, came from a world of tradition, where family meant everything and privacy wasn't just preferred, it was sacred. Their wedding in Las Vegas had been a small, joyful affair. But while it started as a union built on affection, something began to shift once the celebrations faded and reality set in. The Guilianos were deeply protective of their name, proud of their roots, and known for keeping family business within the family. Meghan, however, had a different rhythm, one that leaned toward independence and reinvention. She was restless, hungry for something beyond the familiar walls of Chicago. When the first rumors surfaced, those whispers that she was expecting a silent storm brewed inside the Giuliano household. What should have been a moment of happiness turned into a defining fork in the road. According to those close to the family, there was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, just a quiet, heavy decision made around a dining table that suddenly felt colder. The Guilianos, determined to avoid public attention, reportedly chose to handle the situation their way. They would protect the family's privacy at all costs. Meghan, meanwhile, was told she could pursue her dreams if she agreed to leave the past behind. By the summer of 1995, insiders say a baby girl was born. But unlike most new lives that spark celebration, this one was wrapped in mystery. Neighbors later recalled seeing a child at Guiliano gatherings, introduced vaguely as a relative's daughter, never confirmed and never discussed again. No birth announcements, no public records, and no connection to Meghan's name. It was as if the story had been erased before it even began. Joe stayed close, maintaining quiet contact, but Meghan was already stepping into a new world. Northwestern University, auditions, early acting work. Her path was unfolding just as she'd always imagined. To her, it may have felt like forward motion. To the Guilianos, it felt like abandonment. They believed they had offered her everything: family, loyalty, unconditional belonging, and in return, she had chosen ambition. One friend of Joe's was once overheard saying, "She didn't just leave him. She left everything that made her one of us." When the marriage ended, it didn't collapse in public. It simply vanished. No tabloids, no messy divorce filings. Just an annulment, quietly processed and permanently sealed. Those familiar with the family insist it came with a single binding condition: silence. Meghan would have her clean slate, and the Guilianos would have their secrecy. Whether money changed hands remains unclear. Some say it did, others say it didn't matter. What mattered was erasing an entire story before the world could tell it. Yet even silence can echo. Behind the Guilianos' closed doors, the pain never really left. The nursery stayed untouched, the memory lingered, and the question, why, hung in the air for years. To outsiders, Meghan Markle appeared to be a woman who built herself from nothing, sculpting her image through discipline and grace. But to those who remember the Guilianos, she was someone who had everything and walked away before the world could know what she left behind. What really drove Meghan to leave it all behind? Let's dive into the mystery of the Guilianos' sudden disappearance and its hidden echoes. The vanishing of the Guilianos. By the time the Guilianos left Chicago, it wasn't just their house that felt empty. It was as if their entire existence had been carefully erased. No goodbyes, no forwarding address, not even a trace of where they'd gone. The moving truck rolled in before sunrise, and by noon, the home that once buzzed with laughter and weekend barbecues was hollow and still. Curtains fluttered in the open air, and the faint smell of lemon polish hung in rooms stripped bare of life. Neighbors stood on the sidewalks that afternoon, whispering guesses no one could prove. Some said Joe Giuliano had gotten into trouble with the wrong kind of people. Others swore his wife, Anna, had taken the children and vanished overseas. But what made the story linger wasn't their disappearance. It was what they left behind. Months later, a woman named Clara, who once lived across the street, received a small brown parcel with no return address. It was postmarked from a tiny coastal town in southern Italy. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet, the kind a mother might give her daughter. It bore one simple engraving, Lucia. The problem was, no one had ever heard of Lucia in the Guiliano family. Not Joe and Anna's neighbors, not their relatives who occasionally visited from New Jersey. The name appeared from nowhere, like a whisper from a secret past. Clara took the bracelet to her parish priest, hoping for answers. But the moment he saw it, his expression changed. He told her to burn it immediately and never speak of it again. That, of course, only deepened the mystery. Around Chicago's Italian community, quiet rumors began to take shape. Some claimed the Guilianos had fled to Calabria under assumed names, while others insisted they'd been spotted in Montreal months later. But beneath the swirl of gossip was one persistent and unsettling theory. The child named Lucia wasn't Joe's, she was Meghan's. The claim sounded absurd at first, yet the timing raised questions too strange to ignore. Meghan Markle's early years were carefully documented, but there was a peculiar gap in her college timeline, one missing semester that had quietly disappeared from records. Could it be coincidence, or was it deliberately hidden? But what really happened during Meghan's missing semester? And how does it connect to the Guiliano family's sudden disappearance? Let's dive into this puzzling mystery. A mystery that refused to fade. The story of the Giuliano family didn't end. It simply dissolved, like ink washed from a page. Their Chicago home, once alive with noise and laughter, now stands abandoned, the paint peeling from its windows, and the mailbox still faintly carrying their name. Neighbors say they left quietly, taking nothing but a few suitcases. No farewell, no forwarding address, no explanation. To most, it looked like a routine move. But those who knew them better whispered that something about their exit felt rehearsed, too quiet, too precise, almost as if they wanted to disappear, not relocate. For years, silence was the only answer anyone got. The family's phone numbers went dead. Their social records stopped cold. And even relatives who once sent Christmas cards heard nothing again. Some thought they had fled, financial troubles. Others believed they were hiding from something darker. What could drive a family to erase their own existence? It wasn't until much later that faint traces of the Guilianos began to surface across the Atlantic. A closed bank account in Milan, a property deed signed under an unfamiliar name in Sicily. Locals in a small coastal town recalled a reserved couple who spoke Italian with an American lilt. The woman introduced herself as Anna Lucia, known for her strict manners but unexpected kindness. The man was simply Joseph, quiet, polite, and always glancing over his shoulder. With them was a little girl who rarely spoke, never attended the local school, and was often seen staring at the sea as if waiting for something or someone. No one asked too many questions. In southern Italy, secrets are kept like heirlooms, polished, protected, and never spoken of aloud. Yet even among those accustomed to mystery, the Guilianos stood out. They lived modestly, paid in cash, and avoided the camera lens. Once, during a village festival, someone tried to take a group photograph. Joseph stepped aside, his hand on the child's shoulder, politely declining with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Years later, journalists digging into Meghan's early past, long before the palace, before the headlines, found gaps that defied logic. Entire months missing from official timelines, sealed documents, and a curious photograph taken near Lake Como in the late 1990s. In it, Meghan appears to be walking along a narrow path, her face turned toward the water. But behind her, almost out of focus, a man holds a little girl's hand. His face is hidden from view, but the stance, the build, something about it raised questions no one could answer. Who was that man? And why did the image vanish from public archives not long after it resurfaced online? The more investigators searched, the more the story unraveled into quiet speculation. Some suggested the Guilianos knew something, or someone, they weren't supposed to. Others hinted at family ties hidden by design, fragments of truth buried beneath layers of reinvention. Whatever the reason, their silence became their shield. Today, that abandoned house in Chicago remains untouched, frozen in time, The neighbors still say that on quiet nights, you can almost hear a door creak open and the echo of footsteps fading down the hall. And somewhere far away, in an Italian village where English words are still whispered with caution, the name Guiliano lingers like a ghost, a reminder that some disappearances are not about escape, but about survival. Perhaps the Guiliano didn't vanish to hide from the world. Perhaps they vanished to protect something the world was never meant to find. But what secret could tie an abandoned Chicago house to whispers in a distant Italian village? Let's dive into the mystery that refuses to fade. The forgotten ties of Meghan Markle. Decades have passed, yet the whispers have never truly faded. Somewhere between royal grandeur and ordinary life lies a story that refuses to rest, a story buried under silence, protected by those who once vowed loyalty to a name now almost erased, Guiliano. Long before the world knew Meghan Markle as the Duchess of Sussex, another name seemed to follow her shadow, appearing in stray records and sealed files that should never have met public eyes. It wasn't until 2024, when a freelance journalist named Aaron Vale stumbled upon a string of forgotten archives in Rome, that the whispers began to take form again. What began as routine research into missing inheritance documents quickly spiraled into something stranger. Pages with blurred dates, redacted names, and a recurring signature, a Guiliano. Aaron's curiosity turned into obsession. He dug through immigration logs, baptism records, and even expired passports, each hinting at a family that had once lived quietly in the Italian countryside before disappearing in the late 1990s. Locals spoke of a couple, Joseph and Anna Lucia Guiliano, who left behind a small villa near Palermo and were never seen again. But what startled Aaron most wasn't their disappearance, it was what came after. One spring evening, an anonymous message landed in his inbox. No words, no sender, just a grainy photograph taken on a sunlit street somewhere in Italy. A woman in a scarf stood beside a flower stall, half hidden from the camera, while beside her, a young woman smiled shyly. The resemblance was uncanny. The same eyes, the same smile. The image seemed to whisper a question. Was this woman truly a stranger, or someone the world thought it already knew? The file's metadata placed the photo in 2015, just 2 years before Meghan's engagement to Prince Harry. Coincidence? Or connection? Every inquiry Aaron made after that was met with polite deflection or sudden silence. Records that once existed seemed to vanish overnight. Even officials who had been helpful before now claimed ignorance. And yet, strange details began to surface. In Milan, a notary confirmed a sealed legal transfer linked to an untraceable trust. The signature once again marked Joe Giuliano. Around the same time, a British newspaper briefly reported a confidential visit made by a royal representative to Italy, only for the story to be retracted hours later. Then there was the rumor of a young woman applying for dual citizenship, listing her father's surname as Guiliano and her place of birth as Los Angeles. Was it all coincidence, or the outline of a truth too complicated to reveal? An aging priest, once stationed near Naples, offered only a cryptic comment when asked about the Giulianos. "You cannot bury the truth," he whispered. "It grows roots, even in stone." Today, Aaron still searches, convinced that the photo was not a hoax, but a key, a silent link between two worlds, one royal and one quietly erased. Perhaps that woman at the flower stall knows more than anyone dares to admit. Perhaps the Guilianos never truly vanished. And perhaps, somewhere in those blurred lines of history, lies a secret the monarchy hoped the world would forget. So, what do you think really happened between Meghan and Joe Giuliano's family that made them turn against her? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe, and stay tuned for more royal revelations.